Welcome to Sideline Sanity with Michele Tafoya, sponsored by Legacy Precious Metals. There's never been a better time to invest in precious metals. Visit legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com. Coming up, what exactly is school choice?
For nearly 3 decades, she's reported the action from the sidelines. She started very young. She's covered the NBA, NFL, Olympics, and the college football and basketball national championships. And now, during these insane times in our world, Michele Tafoya thinks we need a serious dose of sanity. This is Sideline Sanity with your host, one of the sanest people on planet Earth, Michele Tafoya.
So, for a long time, I've been hearing the term school choice. And I think one of the side effects that came with COVID was parents' ability to look into their kids' classrooms and see what's really going on. And we have seen almost a little epidemic of parents going to school board meetings and saying, "What? How? What? Why? Why are we doing this?" And it's very, very interesting. And so the subject of school choice seems to be gaining some momentum here over the last couple of years. And I've been in touch with an organization called EdChoice. They've been around for a long time. And it's important to me. I was able to put my kids in a school that I wanted to, and not everyone is. And why not? And are there drawbacks? Let's talk about this. I think it's really important. So we welcome Steve Holwerda on. He is the vice president of development from EdChoice, edchoice.org. If you want to go, they have amazing resources there if you want to look at this. But this is not an infomercial for EdChoice. Steve and I are going to talk as though I know nothing about this, as I hope a lot of you come to this conversation with a lot of questions. Let's try to get them answered. Steve, thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me, Michele. It's an honor to be here. I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, so you're hearing this. What many people may not have seen that I saw from my little vantage point here in my office was you nodding along. Right now, what kind of experience are you guys having in terms of parents raising their hands and saying, "Can I send my kid somewhere else?"
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of that. I think you're right when you had initially said that the pandemic certainly changed the conversation. It had been a conversation for a long time. As you mentioned, we've been an organization for over 25 years now, fighting for this cause. But the pandemic definitely kicked it into overdrive, I would say. You're right. Parents did get to see behind the curtain a little,
Yeah.
and some of them were a little surprised maybe with what they saw. And so we're seeing a lot of conversations now around the country of parents talking about what else is there for my family and for my child. And a lot of them are taking it on themselves to find a solution that works for them. And we as an organization definitely support that we want to make sure that families are making the right choice for their own children and not having that choice forced on them by someone else.
You mentioned the organization and its cause. How did this organization come to be? What was that? How did the cause sort of emerge?
Sure. So our organization was founded by Milton and Rose Friedman. They're world famous economists from a long time ago. And I believe Milton started talking about this all the way back in the 1950s, that he was trying to find a solution for the issue of education in our country. And he first started talking about vouchers back in 1955 and saying that that is kind of the exit plan for families from a system that was not built for everyone. It might be working for some, but it certainly isn't working for all. And so he founded our organization back in 1996 as the Milton and Rose Friedman Foundation for Educational Choice. Kind of a long name, but since then we've shortened our name to EdChoice, but we're certainly still carrying out the legacy of the Friedmans and following the path that they put in front of us of trying to make sure educational choice is available for all families across the country, regardless of their situation. We want to make sure that it's available for everyone.
You mentioned the word vouchers.
Yes.
As I understand it, Steve, vouchers are a way to say, here is the taxpayer money that would be spent to educate your child. It will follow your child wherever you want to send your child. Not, your child has to go to the school that we tell them to go to. Is that about right? How would you explain it?
Yeah, more or less, that's correct. Vouchers are one of the vehicles that we're now seeing in the educational choice movement. Vouchers was kind of the first step, I would say, in the process of getting school choice available for families. And you're correct, Michelle, that a voucher would be something that a family can use to offset the tuition costs or other educational costs that they may incur at a school that isn't assigned to them based on their zip code.
Right.
You know, people do make other forms of choice. We choose the houses that we lived in a lot of times based on the school district.
Yeah.
People have been making these choices for a long time. Vouchers was that first step into making it a little bit more convenient and easier for people to do so.
I would imagine there's a large pushback against just the idea of school choice in a country where we talk about choice so often and all of the rights given to us. It seems to me the ability to put your kid in the school that you want to ought to be automatic. But what is the pushback? Where does it originate?
It comes from a lot of different places. I think change is always hard
Hmm.
and challenging, particularly when you've got an institution like our educational system that's been around for a long time. I mean, since the beginning of our country, we've
Right.
we've had a system here that's worked for some, not necessarily for all. So I think you see some pushback from the institution itself. There's going to be other groups that are heavily involved in the public education system that don't necessarily like this kind of change. And I think what we talk about at EdChoice quite a bit is a lot of the arguments that people make against educational choice and school choice are based in fear. And some of that fear is the unknown. We at EdChoice and others like us that are in this movement are trying to make opportunities based on hope for families rather than fear. And we feel like that's when you give a family hope, that's when they start to get excited about their choices and the options that they have. And that's what we're trying to offer people. I think there's a lot of messaging out there that may not necessarily be true based on the fiscal side of educational choice, that using these dollars for a private school or a charter school homeschool rather than a public school is going to hurt those public schools, when in reality ed choice has done a lot of research on this and published a lot of information proving that that's not really true, that it doesn't fiscally hurt the public schools, and in fact in some levels the ability of those schools to become a better school is certainly on the forefront now. Competition makes everything better.
Amen to that. A competition and maybe when the kids are spread out a little bit more to some of these other schools, you have smaller class sizes. I can think of that off the top of my head. But in addition to vouchers, and again, I want to make it really clear, I'm not sitting here doing an infomercial for EdChoice or any other organization. I think it's really important, though, that people hear more about this. I want to provide this platform for this conversation on both sides because, we're in a weird time. We're in a really weird time. And I think people would like to know that their kids are getting the best opportunity available to them. So you talked about vouchers, but you said there are other forms that this could take. What are they?
Yep. So we're starting to see more and more creativity, should we say, when it comes to legislation that states are starting to put forward. One of the ones that has gained a lot of traction lately is an ESA, an education savings account. They work in a very similar manner to a healthcare savings account, where a family would receive, to put it simply, probably not the actual case where you get a debit card, but it'd be a spending account of some kind that you can use for the education of your child. Um, each state is going to be different in how these are implemented and talked about based on the educational needs and the setup of that state. Certain states have larger cities than others,
Right.
and the educational formats have to look a little different. So with an ESA, it's something where each state and each family would be able to choose what's best for them. So with these ESAs, you could choose to use that for the tuition costs of a private school, or you could use it for tutoring costs that you may have that your child needs specifically. Um, any educational expense, as I said, similar to a healthcare savings account, you would be able to use it for any educational expense. There's also tax credit programs that are in place in certain states. Tax credit scholarships are also in place in states around the country. So you're starting to see more and more creativity, which is exciting.
Yeah.
That people are trying to find ways that fit and work for their state, their town, their family.
How does homeschooling fit into all of this? Because that certainly is a choice that it seems to me more people are making, not only during the pandemic, but just I see it growing. I don't remember seeing or knowing anyone who was homeschooled when I was a kid, and now it seems like I meet them all the time. What's behind that?
Yeah, I'm similar to you. I did not know very many homeschooled children when I was a kid. So it's something that has really gained some traction. As you mentioned, during the pandemic, I think we saw an explosion of homeschool opportunities for families. And now we've at EdChoice, we've done some studies on hybrid homeschooling, where you're using part homeschool, part classroom work with other families. So that has taken a lot of forms as well. But we're certainly seeing more interest in that. We're getting more questions about it of, what does that look like for me and my family? And again, I think some of it goes back to that curtain being pulled back
Yeah,
and families and parents seeing behind that curtain and thinking, my better option might be to educate my child myself.
yeah.
And that's great. If you're able to do that, that's great and something we support. Yeah, we're certainly seeing more and more of it. We do a monthly poll here as well, and some of our questioning is asking parents about their willingness to return to the school situation that they were in prior to the pandemic. And we're seeing more and more parents responding differently in that I don't know that I want my child back 5 days a week in school. So maybe it's a hybrid of that, of 2 to 3 days in a classroom setting and then homeschool from there. So again, the options are really starting to grow, and families are getting more creative with what's the best way to educate my child to give them a successful future.
It's really interesting that you mentioned that states, and for obvious reasons, states have different needs, right? You can't
Yes.
apply a blanket answer to this question and say because you've got rural schools, you've got city schools, you've got all of this going on. Where do you see states really having success? I mean, do we have anecdotal or even, empirical data to suggest that this is a really good idea? Because it sounds to me like it is, but I can also see pitfalls in terms of, well, what about the standardized levels that we need each kid to reach in order to go to college and yada yada yada. So where is the empirical data? Where's the anecdotal stuff that tells you at EdChoice that it's working?
Yeah, we're seeing it, as you said, states are different from one another, so you really can't compare them apples to apples. But we are seeing it, around the country in states that do have large choice options available. So a state like Indiana, we're located in Indianapolis, so we see Indiana around us, and people I work with, they have children in school, and so we are impacted by this very directly in Indiana. And we have a lot of choice options available. We have a voucher program here in the state. We have an ESA program in the state as well, and we're seeing here that again the public schools are not being hurt by this. They're continuing to do their thing. In fact, many of them are getting better. And the private schools, the charter schools, they're also continuing to see improvement in their work. I don't know that we've seen a massive improvement one over another, whether a private school is significantly better now than a public school. We haven't seen that. I think, the rising tide raises all ships argument is certainly applicable here. And it causes everything to get better. So I think that's the empirical evidence that we've seen so far, is that there's been improvement across the state when you have larger programs available for families to choose. Some states have chosen to take a bit by bit approach of pass a small program and then see where that goes from there. Others, West Virginia last year passed a massive ESA program, the largest in the country to date, where it would impact the majority of the students in the state, the vast majority of the students in the state. We're still waiting to see, because it's so new, to see what impact that is going to have. But I think just based on historical data that we have, we expect to see some pretty positive results in West Virginia as well.
And you say, schools are getting better. How do we measure better? How do we know this?
That's a really great question to ask, and it's a challenging one to answer, in that, without those standardized tests, and we don't really want to get into that. It's not something that EdChoice does, is talking about testing and that sort of thing. But that's certainly one way to measure it, of better results in a state. I think we measure things of schools being better in availability of them to the families that want to use it. If this is a better option for you and your child, you should be able to do that. And I think that's where you see happier families and better results that way.
Right.
So as far as data goes, it's hard to point to anything that's really doing that. But I think just that the soft side of it, you start to see some improvement there, and just you know those things that are the hard to measure type stuff is
Yeah.
probably where you see it the
Yeah.
most.
I'm hearing people, not that I have voices in my head, although sometimes, Steve, I do, but
Well, we all do.
I'm hearing people want to argue, and here are a couple things I think people will say. First of all, does school choice become a more relevant topic in red states versus blue states? Is that something you can even answer? I mean, do you see more school choice availability, or states pursuing it when they are led by Republican governors, let's say, versus Democrat governors? Because, you know, I think we can honestly look at this situation and see that teachers unions are largely supportive of Democrats.
Yeah, we try to avoid the political side of
That's
it.
so smart. But damn it, I want an answer.
Yeah, right. I'm sure you do. I'm sure listeners would love that as well. We try to avoid the political side of it, and honestly, I won't answer that question directly.
Okay.
However, we have done a recent study, which talks to parents in states around the country. So we polled parents around the states, around the country in different states, and we've found that regardless of what political party that person, the parent that was answering the question, regardless of party, the majority of people want educational choice for their family. So whether or not the politicians are listening to them, that's a different conversation.
Yeah.
But we have actual data that shows that regardless of the assumed color of that state, whether red, blue, purple,
Yeah. There are
whatever the
purples.
color
Yes.
is, we've seen families responding in a very similar way, in that choice is a good thing and they want it,
Yeah.
overwhelmingly want it.
Uh,
So again, I won't get into the political side of that, but we
Understood. But
we do have evidence showing that people do want this.
across the board, and
Yes,
that's, I mean, when it comes to your kids, politics kind of goes out the window. You want what you want for your kids.
that's
And
right.
and that's why I think this issue is, and especially in the last few years now, is growing in this way. So, but what do you say to parents, for instance, who are frustrated because they don't have it right now, and they don't feel that they're being heard? Like you said, whether or not the politicians are listening, maybe we don't know, but I suppose that can take place at the ballot box. But I'm sure there are a lot of parents who feel fairly helpless in this. Like, they'd really like to have this choice, but they don't know how to go get it. So
Yeah.
can you assist them? Can anyone assist them in that way?
Certainly, and again, not to turn this into a EdChoice advertisement,
Right.
but we do have information available for anyone on our website. But we also do trainings for people, and we're willing to talk with anyone that wants to call in and ask questions about their specific state, about their specific issue. We're happy to take those questions and help answer those, and help guide them with information and data that they can use in their own state, in conversations with others around them, whether that be other families that are in a similar situation, or people that can make a difference. Um, in the legislature. Again, we don't tell people who to vote for, who to not vote for. That's not our thing at
Right.
all. But we just want to give people the training and the information available. We like to just bring people together around the issue.
Yeah.
And the more people you have on board that are vocal about it, the more likely it is that things will start to move in the right direction for the families that want this so badly.
Steve Holwerda, hang on with us for just one second. Quick break. And then when we come back, we're going to talk about the fact that EdChoice is just one of many organizations out there. And I'm always
Yeah,
curious as to why organizations don't band together more. But this is something we'll get into with Steve in just one second. Folks, since November of last year, the stock market has plummeted, but gold has been on the rise. Gas prices are insane. The stock market is extremely volatile. Inflation is even worse than it was a year ago. And now we have this war with Russia and Ukraine that could spread to the rest of the world. The markets don't like instability, but the good news is you have options. Gold prices are rising as investors turn to gold for protection. Gold provides a hedge against inflation and protects against the weakening dollar. Legacy Precious Metals is the only company I trust when investing in gold and silver. You need an investment that will protect your wealth and retirement. Call Legacy Precious Metals today. Be proactive while there is still time. Remember 2008? Those who invested in gold saw huge gains while others lost their retirements. Legacy Precious Metals can advise you on all your options for investing in gold and silver. You can speak to an IRA expert at Legacy Precious Metals at 866-528-1903, 866-528-1903, or download their free investor's guide at legacypminvestments.com, legacypminvestments.com. All right, back with Steve Holwerda of EdChoice. You can find him at edchoice.org. Again, I'm not pushing their agenda. I like this organization. I'll be candid.
thank you.
But I also know there are lots of others out there, Steve, and I've gotten so many emails since COVID began of, save our schools, all these different organizations out there.
Mhm.
And it's like any other topic, whether you want to care for animals, you've got the Humane Society, you've got the ASPCA, you've got all these organizations that want to do the same thing. And you think, wouldn't it just be more efficient if they all got together and worked as one? But that doesn't seem to happen. What is the relationship between different organizations surrounding this same topic of allowing parents to choose the school that best suits their kid?
Sure. Yeah, there are, as you mentioned, a lot of organizations out there around the country that are fighting for this same issue. We're in very general terms pulling the same direction, and we really do want the same thing. I think ultimately we all do. We want the exact same thing, that universal choice for all across the country, regardless of what state you live in or your financial situation or anything like that. We all want that, and work together. I think probably more often than is seen publicly.
Oh, really?
We do work together quite a bit. Our when the bill passed last year in West Virginia, we put out a press release on it, and I'm sure others did as well. But to list off the groups that we worked with in order to get that accomplished, it was a long list of people that worked together to make something like that happen. And I think the reason, back to your point of why are there so many organizations doing the same thing, we all have different connections and I have different ways to get to that finish line. And so that's why we continue to maintain different organizations, but ultimately we all want the same thing and want to continue to work together and make a better place for all of us, through
Mhm.
educational choice. So there are a lot of them out there. We're one, obviously. I'm biased a little bit towards Ed
Of
Choice, of
course you
course,
are. Of course.
but there are others out there that are doing some great work as well, and we're happy to call them partners of ours and work together on a pretty regular basis.
I want to ask you a question I'm not sure you're going to be able to answer,
Okay.
but I'm going to throw it at you anyway. I hear very often throw more money at the issue. If public schools aren't doing their jobs properly, it's because they're underfunded. I don't buy into that one because it's first of all, it's an easy answer that we generally throw at any problem facing society. Throw more money at it. My mom was a school teacher in public schools her whole entire career. So I watched this firsthand, some of the struggles, some of the successes. Why is this more of a problem, quote unquote, than one that can just be resolved with throwing more money at public schools?
Yeah, as you mentioned, Michelle, that does tend to be an answer that people give almost for any situation out there, whether it's
Yeah.
education or anything else. Throw a pile of money at it and that'll solve the problem. But I think we've all seen that that's not a viable solution. I suppose in some short-term way it could, but over the last few years, with some of the pandemic funding that we saw come out to schools, there's more money out there right now than there's been in a long, long time.
And some of it isn't even spent yet, is
No,
it? I mean, it's just sitting there.
yeah, yeah, it's trying to find ways. It's I think even the institutions themselves weren't. They're not really prepared for that, and I think that might be part of the issue. Where throwing a pile of money at anything, if you're not ready to use that money or don't have a plan to use it, you're really not going to be able to make an impact with that. So yes, that's a solution. It's not a very good one of throwing money at the problem.
Yeah.
I think you'd be better served in again making school choice available for families. Use some of that money for that, and that may actually solve the problem. But yeah, to throw a pile of money at any issue, including education, is usually not a very winning solution.
Well, if I recall correctly, Milton Friedman, as you've noted, is the founder of
Yes.
EdChoice under a different name,
Yep.
initially approached this whole topic from an economic standpoint. What is the most efficient way to spend money on education?
Yes.
And what he came up with was let the money follow the student. That's sort of the very, thumbnail sketch of it. But isn't that how this all started?
That's absolutely right. Yes, and when he started talking about it, that was one of the things he talked about is, and we all know, Milton Friedman, I mean, he's a brilliant economist and way
Correct.
smarter than me on any of this stuff for sure. And, for him to come up with an idea like that, have the money follow the student, it just makes a lot more sense. Logically, it makes a lot more sense, let alone fiscally. And as I mentioned earlier, we've done a lot of fiscal analysis of that, of what is the impact in a state with large programs such as like Indiana, as I mentioned, and it doesn't hurt anything to have money following a child. It hasn't hurt the bottom line of our public institutions at all. So I think Milton was right that the best way to do it is fund the family, fund the child, and then let them choose how they want to use it to best educate them. Parents know them a lot better than the state does. I would never presume to know something about someone else's child, and their mom and dad can know that the best. So they should
Yeah.
choose.
I I I have to bring this up. It's sort of standing in front of me like an elephant in the room. We had this horrific mass shooting in Uvalde,
Yeah.
Texas a week ago,
Yes.
and I think it made people think, what do I want my school environment to look like for my child? How can I not have a safer school when the press secretary for the president of the United States says hardening schools is not in his interest? I think a lot of parents would say, "Damn it, harden my school. I want to feel that my kid is safe." How much does that impact the way parents view where they want to put their kids in school? Is that a factor?
It absolutely is a factor, and that incredible tragedy that we saw last week. It breaks my heart to even talk about it.
I know.
That one and many others. It's sad that we can even say there's been more.
I
But
know.
yes, that's something that definitely weighs on parents' minds of safety of their child at school. I think safety of their child anywhere, anytime
Anywhere, yeah.
is the number one priority of parents most of the time, I would imagine. And it's definitely something that weighs on people as they make this decision of where they want their child to be educated. And it's also a question that we ask in our polling as well of, when you rank things of what's most important to you as far as where you send your child to be educated, that's always one of the things that comes up is, safety of the institution.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
imagine, after something like that, I don't know, I haven't seen the polling from this month yet, but I would imagine that one will bump up the priority list significantly, as it should. I think
Yeah.
it's critical that our children be safe and feel safe in the place where they're trying to learn. If you're concerned about safety while you're trying to learn math, that's two competing things, and it's hard to focus.
It's so difficult to talk about.
Yeah.
It really is. What are some of the other top priorities for these parents that you poll?
Yeah, so what we're seeing quite often from parents is, quality of education is obviously an important
Sure.
thing. Um, Safety, as I said, is always climbing up. I actually, if you give me a moment here, I brought
Yeah,
some of
please
this
take your time.
with me so that I can answer. I didn't know you were going to ask this question, but
I'm so sorry. I put you on the spot,
that's
but you know
okay.
what? This is a podcast. I want to have the conversation, and fortunately, you've got the access to the
I do,
information.
and I
So,
brought it along thinking that you might ask that question.
uh,
So it looks here from our most recent polling that we have. The number one thing was effective and experienced teachers in the classroom,
interesting. Yeah.
and then adequate resources, personalized instruction. I mean, these are the things that matter to parents. High quality pre-K for those that applies to, and then
Yeah.
safety is on there as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, it seems like, quality instruction in the classroom is of critical importance to parents, and again, if you can choose where you get that from, that would certainly help a lot.
Well, yeah, when you know that your kid is in a massive classroom with a bunch of kids who aren't getting individual attention because the teacher is stretched so thin or whatever,
Yeah,
that's concerning. We all want it for every kid. And coincidentally, yesterday I was speaking with Dr. Marty McCary of Johns Hopkins. We were talking about the impact of COVID on kids learning and kids even attending school. And he mentioned Baltimore because Johns Hopkins is near there.
sure.
And some of these kids that didn't have access to the Zoom, didn't have access to Wi Fi, just didn't attend school. And now are just not attending school anymore.
Yeah,
And I think that these parents would love to have resources, friends, any concerned person in this child's sphere would love to be able to direct them to a place that is going to work for that kid. It's a
absolutely.
complex issue. There are so many, but what I'd like to push back on is people coming back to it for one thing with one argument of it's too complicated, or I should just be able to put my kid in a public school and trust that that's fine. But the fact of the matter is the world we want to live in and the world that we actually live in are a little bit they're different right now.
Yes.
And so, being able to provide a spectrum of options to people is so important, even if it's just saying, I want to put my kid in the parochial school that my church provides, but I need a little money for that.
Yep.
um, I guess I'd say, do you boil this down for us? And then I have one more question for you. What, what is the macro picture here? What is the biggest hurdle to getting this done?
I I think I think information is probably the biggest hurdle to getting this done. I think there's a lot of misinformation out there of
Yeah.
what this is going to hurt, the damage that's going to be done if we do this, and I think we're missing the main point here in that the damage is already being done. And with the pandemic, as you mentioned, there were some students that just disappeared. They didn't have access
Disappeared.
to the resources that they needed, and that's just sad that's the case. And to the point of sometimes the assigned school that someone may have due to zip code isn't working for them. It does work for others. And at
Yeah.
EdChoice and I think other organizations similar, we're not trying to hurt public schools here at all. We're all for it. And we're not saying teachers are bad. There's a lot of great teachers out there. some of them are just in a tough situation where
Yeah.
it doesn't work for them either.
Yeah.
So, we want to make sure that every family has every choice available to them, whatever that may be. Whether it's public, private, charter school, homeschool, parochial school. To us, it doesn't matter. We just want to make sure that every child, every family has an opportunity to put their child where it can make the most impact in that kid's life, and that's what it's all about to us. But I think a lot of it is just misinformation or not enough information out there about
Right.
what we do.
Right, and you said it at the very beginning that the information that some people like to disseminate is based on fear instead of hope,
Yes,
and I would suggest to anyone listening to this, when someone tries to make you afraid of some sort of change, challenge it in your own mind. Challenge it. Push back and say, "Well, there might be an upside here. What might that be?" Instead of just succumbing to the fear that is pushed at you by people who oppose this idea. And
yep,
and this leads me to my last question for you, because again, it feels like an elephant in the room. And maybe we touched on this tangentially, but let's go there again.
okay.
How big of an obstacle are these teachers' unions, and how much of the disinformation is coming from them? And I'm putting you in a tough position because I'm kind of asking you to throw them under the bus. And I guess I don't mean to do it that way. But in general, teachers' unions don't like the idea of change.
They don't, and again, I think we need to make sure that we separate the teachers from the union.
Yes, absolutely.
Again,
Let's do okay, everyone hear that? We are separating the teachers from the unions. The teachers are unions again, it's an umbrella that oversees what these teachers can and can't do, can and can't ask for, get paid, don't get paid. The union is a different thing. Okay, from that
Correct.
foundation, go ahead.
From that foundation, it is certainly one of the places where that misinformation comes from, where the fear is being sown. And so that is one of the things that we need to talk about and discuss with an organization and with other organizations like ours of how do we make sure that the right information is out there at all times for people. The true information is out there. That hopeful information that we mentioned before. And again, the teachers, they're great. For the most part, teachers are fantastic and they do a great job. And I'm not one for a lot of reasons. And, the people that have chosen that profession, I think they have really done something great for them and for the next generation. But we do need to make sure that we separate that from the union, at large. And that's where a lot of the information comes from. They're very well funded, that's for sure. And so that makes the challenge a little tougher sometimes for us because we are dependent on the charitable gifts that come in to our organization. And I do the best I can to get as many here as possible. But competing dollar for dollar with them is a losing battle every day.
Ugh.
So again, it just comes down to tell the truth, and this is what's happening. And EdChoice as an organization makes sure that we are very honest with our high quality research that we have, and we produce regardless of how that outcome, even if it's different than we thought it was going to be when we started the research project, we will tell the truth. And this is what it is, and this is why it is. And I think that's how you bring this issue to the forefront of make sure that you're honest about it, you're doing it for the right reasons, and that reason being we've got to help these families and their children get the best possible opportunity for the next step of their lives.
Steve Holwerda, our guest, Vice President of Development at EdChoice. You can check it out at edchoice.org. I said I had the last question, but I do want to give you an opportunity to present if parents, because I know you do training,
Yes.
and parents who feel helpless in this, like they don't know how to push back, how to work within the system, against the system, whatever the case may be. Give us an idea of what they can learn through EdChoice.
Yeah, so with EdChoice, and most of this information can be found on our website, as Michele mentioned, edchoice.org. A lot of this information can be found there as well. But what you can expect from us is, again, high quality research, data analytics, policy experience and expertise on different policies across the country in individualized states, training and messaging strategies for you as a parent or a supporter of this work. We can offer all of those things to you, and are happy to take any questions through our website, phone call, any of that. We've got a lot of people here that would be very happy to help those that are looking for this information. But again, we can stay at 30,000 feet or get all the way down to the grassroots level. We're happy to work on any of those levels with someone, and we get to where you are and meet you where you need us to be.
Well, I'm a fan. I'm going to put that out there. That's
Thank
honest,
you.
but I do want people to know I'm not just this is not an infomercial for EdChoice. This is a movement that we see happening, and Steve, with that, I will let you go. Thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here, and thanks for the opportunity.
You got it. So to parents and grandparents and students who are listening to this, uncles, aunts, sisters, whoever you are, when you hear these fearful messages about changing the landscape of education in America, don't be afraid. I'm just going to give you permission right now to drop the fear and instead adopt hope and curiosity. And if you've got the time, and this speaks to you, and it certainly speaks to me, my husband and I are both products of public schools all the way until I went to grad school at USC, but that's another story. But up until then, my mom, public school teacher, my husband's mom was a sign language interpreter at public schools. This is, we are products of that. But my mom was a school teacher, and I have had conversations with her about what the pitfalls are, particularly where it comes to these unions, not the teachers' unions, and some of the sort of mandates that they impose. You ought to have freedom when it comes to choosing where your kid goes to school. Period. The end. Every kid gets to choose where they go to college, if they want to go to college. I think kids do need an education before they're 18. So it's not if they go to school, but it's where and how they learn. And kids learn differently. And what might be best for my kid is different from another kid. And your zip code does not have to mandate where you're educated. So educate yourself, push back against the fear on this topic, push back against the misinformation. Don't just trust one source. If you're curious, go learn about it. As my guest Steve said, there are a lot of organizations. I'd encourage you to start with EdChoice. Just check them out at edchoice.org. Look at the information. I'm not asking you to donate. That's up to you. But just look at the information and maybe educate yourself on this and gain, I don't know, a little sanity, a little clarity about the issue. This has been Sideline Sanity. I'm Michele Tafoya. Thanks for listening.